this. Before the meeting, Les said he would start the introductions with a joke, and then he just introduced me.
Some things that's all the better it gets to be.
That's right. So good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure sponsoring this meeting. I'm accompanied, of course, by a few colleagues in the back. You've already seen them and been introduced to them. You've also seen the collateral on the table from Beaudry Oil and some tchotchkes, if you will, or swag from Petro Canada. If you have any questions about their products or services, please feel free to talk with them. We brought them here today for that purpose only. As a matter of fact, one of the case studies I'll be covering today will actually involve a Petro Canada product. So you might have some questions about that as well. I know why you're all here today is not to see me, and it is not lost on me that I'm the guy standing between you and the King Banyan show. But as the warm-up act, let me just say that I think what we have to offer and show you today will be interesting and insightful, and maybe you'll walk away with some new and interesting impressions about the petroleum industry, providers like us, and ways that we view manufacturing environments. So instead of giving you guys a nickel tour of our company, which you can glean from our website or any of the generic literature we provide you, I thought we'd spend some time imparting our impressions of manufacturing as a provider of the world and our unique approach that we have in working with manufacturers. So we'll begin this right now. Did you get it? That looks to be a volume key.
Just hit the pad. Oh, there you go.
There we go. All right. Technology. In 1981, after a successful career in commercial real estate, our founder, Ken Beaudry, woke up one morning with this spiritual epiphany, namely that his work days could be better served and utilized if he transitioned into a business that could support businesses beyond the commercial transaction, provide career opportunities for people, while at the same time giving back to local communities. And so that's how our company was formed back then. And ever since 1981, our business has grown from a few to over 120 employees. Our client portfolio has grown to well over 400 commercial accounts alone. And we consistently give back to the communities. Some examples of that would be food shelves, youth halfway houses, energy assistance to low-income folks, and that's just to name a subset of them. Now, this has always been our place, and we've always done this, but what has evolved over the years has been our approach to the businesses we serve. It's now more forward-thinking, and the philosophy is of product relevance and in creating real value to our business clients. And I want to emphasize that term real, because that's a turnkey phrase for our company. The operative word is attached to value, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later on in the presentation, but for now, what I'd like to do as a precursor is move into just some cursory remarks about our industry and what we see in the manufacturing world today. Now, we'll see if this works. Nope. There we go. First, in the world as it relates to petroleum, what we've studied and what we've experienced firsthand leads us to believe that fossil fuel will be here for the foreseeable future at least, and potentially beyond into 2050. Now, Forbes magazine dedicates a lot of time and energy in studying this particular industry, energy and alternative sources, and they read these 300-page plus reports from the International Energy Agency, and the conclusions that they've come to is that given the trajectory of renewable energy development today, global demand for petroleum in 2030 will plateau at 70% and will only drop by a fraction in 2050. Now, one of the glaring reasons, as you can see to the right side of the slide there, relates to the cost to replace conventional energy systems. And as that grid shows, a significantly greater portion of materials, turbines, land, and non-biodegradable plastic would be needed to replace a single gas-powered turbine engine. So that's one of them. And the other reasons have to do with just adoption, creating an infrastructure, and of course, how insurance companies start approaching these industries. Now, this is not to say that alternative energy is going to flatten out or won't continue to grow. It is going to continue on a path and progression. We all know that it's here to stay. We plan on sharing that stage with them. But what it means to us as a petroleum firm is that we have to start meeting the moment head on and to do our part. That would be remaining proactive with our product and service offerings in an environmentally friendly way, whether it be looking at things like biofuels, synthetics, biodegradable oils like food grade oil, or even those that are free from heavy metals. So let's now move into manufacturing. There we go. So you're going to see, I'm sure, a lot of data and an economic and business perspective from the professor, and I'm not going to try to replicate that today. But instead, what I thought I would do, and what I thought would be interesting, is if we were just to survey how manufacturers feel about their businesses. And I'm sure some of you in the room would be sharing in these impressions today. So these surveys up here were done by the U.S. Census Bureau, NAM, National Association of Manufacturers, AlphaSense, of businesses, small to medium businesses, manufacturers in the realm of 10 to 500 employees. And what this shows is that only a third of manufacturing executives rated their performance as above average, while 24% saw it below average. The common element to those two is what? Operating revenue. That's what that is. And while many felt good about the outlook for their businesses, a similar number felt that a recession would hit us in 2023. And this can maybe explain some of the confusion that people had in approaching manufacturing for 2023. When people are asked, when these same executives are asked what the challenges were that they're facing today, the first four are ones that we've seen time and time again. That's, attracting and retaining talent, external volatilities of raw materials and inflation, adherence to governmental agencies, which we all know, the rule of 12, it usually increases your cost by 12%, and then the downward pricing from some of the foreign competitors that are paying lower wages. The last two are a little bit more of a newer enigma, at least newer, by relationship to the other four, and that's the baby boomer, the aged population that's beginning to retire, coupled with the continuing supply chain disruptions from the pandemic, which has still had an ugly tail for people. So those are some of the things that manufacturers see today, and it creates some particular challenges for them. We've, as an organization, have had the pleasure of sharing the ups and downs with our manufacturing clients for many years. Engineers and plant managers may spend 1 to 4 years in designing equipment, developing it, testing it, putting it on the plant floor, running it, and then they retire or they move on to something else and somebody else takes over, and there's other enhancements and things done to it, and there's more tests happening, and we've been part of the development process and the ongoing process for people. They have come and gone. We have been there for 40 years. And so we've been with many of these companies for decades in working with their equipment. And in the realm of challenges, in our experience, we have come to some very clear impressions on manufacturing objectives. It is not confined to necessarily how you address them. That's just part of the answer. It's also in how you view them, how you categorize them, and how you understand the interrelationships between them. Now, this next slide I'm going to show you is really where the rubber meets the road. And if any of you are going to take a snapshot of any one of the slides in this PowerPoint, this next one would be it. So, in our experiences, in anything having to do with making or building stuff, and even to a certain degree in e-commerce development, from an operational perspective, not sales and marketing, but operational, the objectives manufacturers must address, in our view, will inevitably appear in 3 notable areas. 3 only: costs, complexity, and control. The first section, many of you are very familiar with. You deal with that all the time. Materials, capital equipment, equipment maintenance, and facilities and labor. The other 2 sections are not necessarily compartmentalized by folks, but this is our view of it, and this is what we look at. Complexities relate to how you differentiate between vendor products and reconciling them against legal, OEM, and ISO standards. The control part of it relates to how you prepare for unanticipated events, and even worse, how you avoid consequences like a loss of business or damaged reputation from failures. So again, this is our approach to manufacturing. We walk into the room, these are the things that we're looking at. Now, this is not a silver bullet, folks. I'm not here to give you nirvana, but what we can say is that if you begin to view and see your manufacturing environment in this way, your chances of reaching successful outcomes will improve dramatically over looking at everything individually in a piecemeal fashion. And now that we're seeing things in these categories, you can better appreciate some of the causal relationships that these have. Just as an example, if you fail to meet an ISO standard, the result of that complexity, could mean that you'd have a loss of business of opportunities for people that are actually looking to buy products and expect an ISO standard to be met. Similarly, if you had an unanticipated repair of a piece of equipment, and it turns out that you failed to observe the OEM usage specifications, the warranty that you might have to that would be declined, and that would increase your costs for the equipment. Is this now making sense to everybody? Right? Okay. So now that we've done that, let me turn back to what our impressions, what the term real value means to our company. Any company worth their salt has its own value proposition, especially service and supplier companies. And here's ours right above. So our value proposition starts off as helping customers navigate through the complex lubricant and fuels landscapes while at the same time delivering positive returns and savings and yield. But the word real to that value proposition is next level stuff. So let me try to give you the short and sweet narrative about this. In substance, the real part in value propositions to us is one where we bring our relationships with our clients and customers beyond just customer service, but as a business partner. And it is all in the doing when we reach to that area. So we, for example, won't represent any brands that we wouldn't use ourselves. As a matter of fact, many of the brands that we represent today have been put to use in our own equipment. Our phone lines are all answered by human beings. It's not a voice automated system, so it's all warm call transfer. Our billing cycle actually turns out to be net 40 instead of net 30. And for example, if somebody needed something right away, same day, if we can get it out to them in a rush, we'll do that, but we won't surcharge them for that. Now, this is how business partners act. And so that's sort of the frame of reference that I'm giving you about our company above. How this is applied to manufacturing clients will give you a little bit more of a cleaner perspective on that. In terms of that, what you might expect to see in your own employees today is what we're performing for our clients today. So if there's a product that needs to be tested, if there's a new piece of equipment and they want to have the lubricants in there, they want to experiment with different lubricants to test, we're there to do that. We'll work with people in product mix analysis. We'll even work to help people work with their compliance and feasibility when it comes down to, for example, getting approvals from entities, municipalities, if you will, for fuel. But what some of my customers have really remarked to me personally as being most unique from our company's perspective is in our ability to act as a facilitator between the refinery and the client. And that is because as an organization, we're in regular contact with our suppliers, and we insist from the larger ones in particular that they provide us with a direct line to their experts. So collaboration is really an essential element to these relationships for us. And for those of you that have dealt with vendors before, sometimes you might not find yourself being able to connect with the wholesaler, or in our case the refinery, but we make that possible for our clients. So now that we've covered the core objectives, those 3 C's, and the meaning of a real value proposition, what I want to do now is, from an application perspective, just throw out a few case studies for you to look at. And what you'll be able to see, hopefully, is a little bit about, you know, how we're servicing them from a business partnership perspective, and you'll be able to hopefully see some of the things about those core objectives in manufacturing: cost, complexity, and control. There we go. Case study one, hang on. This is probably the least sexy of the case studies that we have here, because we run into a lot of time, a lot, and we deal with a lot pretty much in our sleep. This is a facility where a new facilities manager actually walked in and was immediately dropped into a tough situation. They were facing code violations because of some poor storage and placement of their equipment and their lubricants, which was impacting their insurance premiums that were going up. There was a lot of poor organization on the floor. They needed to increase the floor space that they had already, and they wanted to create a clear labeling system. So the first thing that we do when we see something like this, in particular with a code violation, is we get on the phone and we try to connect with the city inspectors, with the fire marshals, whoever is doing that, and to keep them engaged all the way throughout, so that whatever we're doing, they're basically subconsciously approving that with us. So at the end, we know that everything will be made kosher. Next, what we do is we bring in equipment specialists, folks that are actually manufacturer reps for these particular companies, to do some measurements, to talk about containment, logistics, where we're going to put them. And then from that point, I work with them to do the design work, it gets configured, and then it gets deployed out. Again, we loop back for approvals with the city all the way, but they're kept in the loop, if you will, throughout. There are some circles that you see there of a briefcase, and my manager remarked on how clever I was in putting my briefcase there so that people wouldn't come to this conclusion that I was using stock image photos, and actually I'm not that clever. It was just an accident. I just, you know, had it there. But where is it? Here it is. Yeah. Here's Waldo. So that's the first study. In the end, everything was done. Everything was clean and sweet, and you can see, you know, from beginning to end how that works. From that, let's go to a more fun one. So this is a classic. This is not a classic example, but one of my favorite ones that I like. This is an example of too much is not always a good thing. This particular client that we have here is one that was operating some equipment outdoors, and they processed plant materials with that equipment. And they were actually recommended a hydraulic oil with a very high zinc content. Now, there is something to be said about oils with high zinc levels, high levels of zinc. Zinc is basically a heavy metal, and the natural concern from this particular group, as well as others with heavy metals, is that it's toxic, it's not biodegradable, and although it can provide great protection to some of the internal component parts, over a shorter period of time, if you're using an inordinate amount of it, it can create greater amounts of varnish and sludge. And let's also not forget, you know, the EPA type laws that are coming people's way, especially in blue states. This was actually one division of a very large company that was national. So they had locations in California, Oregon, Washington states that are you know, heavily legislated when it comes to environmental laws. And so those were the things that was really becoming a concern to them. So the question became, walking into this right away, how do we get to a more environmentally safe product without compromising the good things that zinc could provide? And so what we did is we brought in our friends from Petro-Canada to meet and talk with the client to get a better understanding of what was going on with their facility, what was going on with the equipment, and what they were looking to do. And as fate would have it, they actually had a product that was 40% lower in zinc that they actually used in equipment that was similar to the ones that the client was using. So what we did is we worked with the client to start using this, and we've been testing this as we go along. We identified that lower ppm zinc product, and believe it or not, it was a lower price point for them. If you look to the far side of that slide, you'll see what the test results were, and they're actually very good. given where we're at. So after 800 hours of use, the viscosity indexes all were within the normal ranges. The acid numbers remained virtually unchanged after 800 hours, and wear metals in the oil were found at less than 3 parts per million. So this is one of those eureka moments where we find ourselves now, moving in a better direction. You may ask yourself, why aren't we trying to get rid of zinc altogether if it's so bad? And the answer is, we're heading in that direction with them. But for now, this is where we're stopping. Once we finish several hundred more hours of testing, we'll then start looking at something that even has less to no zinc content in that. And again, the deal with zinc, folks, is that if you're working with it outdoors in hydraulic fluid and it spills and it gets into the ground and it gets into a trout stream, you've got problems beyond just dead trout. And so this is why we start looking at these kinds of solutions to be more environmentally friendly and proactive. Remember, I talked about Beaudry company having to meet the moment. This is one of those examples of that. Let me go to the last case study that we have. Oh, the key takeaway is right there. Equipment performance does not correlate to zinc levels. All right. This last case study I absolutely love because we just don't see it in our work. It's not something that comes up very often, and to be honest, I don't know that we'll see it probably for another decade. So this is a group that makes raw materials in a very innovative and green way. The problem they faced was that the parent company was overseas, and so was the equipment that was designed and developed there. And with the design and development equipment that they were getting, so was this hydraulic oil and some other component parts, in particular, a special cartridge that they used for an auto greaser. All of those were overseas. So just going out and getting that stuff meant that the cost and the time attempted to buying from overseas was going to significantly impact their production schedule, and maybe even the cost, because not only are you paying for it for the shipping to bring it over, you've got the time lag. We forget that there may be some customs involved, import taxes, all of that stuff. In addition to that, what they wanted to do was consolidate a number of their oils, and we identified about 8 of those oils that we could work with. That's not too uncommon. We see that a lot with our clients, but the first part here, we don't see at all. Now, the client that we have here was so innovative in what they were doing, they were actually getting interested parties and had yet to even produce a batch. So there's already a group of customers wanting to buy their products. Add to that clamor. If that wasn't enough, they were actually featured in local nightly news. So kind of a good thing, bad thing. Great that you're getting exposure, but man, oh man, the rubber now is really meeting the road for these folks. So they turned to us, and the people that work for this company were very, very smart. They probably could have figured this out themselves, but they knew that they didn't have the bandwidth to do it in the time that it needed to be done. So they turned to us, and we had some interviews with them, and then we went back and we started mapping things over by identifying the comparable products made on this continent here instead of buying it. We were able to source quality cartridge with a higher yield, that darn cartridge they had to work with. And then we also worked in consolidating the oils from 8 to 3. So, and that's in the area, those were in the areas of grease, gear, and food grade oils. So all of this, in particular, being able to work with a company and understanding, and because we read a lot of specs of oils and products, we read a lot of equipment specs, we're able to figure out how we can do, that product mix and match by mapping things over and getting the right product, especially hydraulic oil, which is very important to them for their production. So in this is one of those cases where time really is money for them. And in offloading the project, and literally this did turn out to manifest itself to be a project in and of itself. We were able to save them some transactional costs and time, and help control some of those business risks, which were, of course, the customer base that was waiting for their products. So they were able to be able to produce that product, and actually came out with the first batch for their customers. Now, let me just step away here and give it to you this way. Remember we talked about the cost, complexity, and control. I'm going to give you the example in this, how this works. So the cost in this one was what? It was the shipping, right? It was the tariffs. It was the time that it took to get there. Those were all the costs. What was the complexity? The complexity portion was managing 8 to 3. It was doing the study of trying to map things over for them, right? And then finding that darn little cartridge that they needed. That was the complexity. And what was the control issue? The customer segment that they're waiting. Remember we talked about the risk of business loss on the control side of it? So again, they had that up. I'll see if I can bring that slide to bear here. Okay. The control issue was loss of business opportunities. What about reputational risk? Was that on the table?
Yeah, with the news.
Right, right. Under normal circumstances, I would probably say, yeah, maybe not. But because they were featured in the news, there was a real reputation involved here. So again, you know, I'm not telling you how to do your jobs. I'm just telling you folks in operations, look at things this way, and you'll have a much better perspective of things as you move on, as we have when we do this. So that's our exercise. That concludes everything that I have to say. I want to thank everybody so much for your time and attention to this. I hope I brought something interesting to bear, and I hope you walk away with an impression that we're just, you know, not a group that, you know, drives around with trucks and delivers fuel and drops them in tanks in the back lot and puts a barrel of oil on your dock. We do more than that. We really do. So if you're developing some equipment and you're looking for fluids and you need somebody to help you out with that, we are here. We are here for that. I want you to feel free to call me anytime. I'm in the directorate. And now I'm no longer the guy standing between you and the main act. Professor.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Okay, so